Hi, I'm Dusty King with King and King, and this is D. Wright with The Starting Place. As many of you may know, I'm one of the founding members of King and King PLC, and a lot of our work deals with divorce and family law related issues. But there are also many issues that are found in those types of situations that the law and the courts are simply not equipped to deal with, and those are going to go to more of the emotional issues that people deal with when they're going through a situation like this. And that's why we have Dee here to kind of give us some tips on how to get through those times. Dee, I've seen some instances in my practice where two people are going through a divorce or they're about to go through a divorce, and of course the trust is gone. People are angry, they're bitter, and you have either one person or in some cases both individuals essentially trying to pick a fight with the other one.
Right.
Now, you hope it doesn't wind up being a physical altercation, but it can obviously get to that point if someone's pushed far enough.
Sure.
And in the legal world, that usually results in the police being contacted. A lot of times somebody's going to jail.
Right.
We have orders of protection filed in the court system, things of this nature. What advice do you have for, number one, two people finding themselves in that situation, and then number two, recognizing those instances where someone is trying to push the other one's buttons?
Right. Well, I think it comes down to, first of all, know yourself and know what your own buttons are. And the other thing is, in a situation like this, understand that anger is a secondary emotion. It comes from hurt. You're first hurt, and then you get angry. So the point there would be to figure out, okay, this person has hurt me, which makes me angry.
Right.
But the idea being, I don't want to make more chaos. So if you find yourself in a divorce situation, you ask yourself, okay, how did I get there? And all this chaos and everything you just described right then, it made my head go like this.
Yeah.
Because it was just a lot of chaos.
Right.
And it's enough already. So you want to make sure that everything that you do is something that brings you peace. So you want to stay protected at the same time, but you want to make sure you're being within reason. So acting without that hurt and that anger, acting within reason, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're able to stay at peace by yourself, within yourself.
Right.
So that you can have a clear conscience, really. So that you're not falling into something that was meant to be bad.
Right.
For you, so you're staying protected. But the most important thing is just protect your boundaries. What are your boundaries? How do you stay safe in that situation?
Well, one thing I typically tell folks, and this really does not matter if we're talking about the husband or the wife. If you find yourself in a situation like that where you know someone is trying to bait you into doing something, first off, don't do anything that you don't want a judge to find out about. I mean, just from my perspective and from the legal perspective.
That sounds like great advice.
And the other thing is, if you find yourself in that situation, you may just need to leave.
Yeah.
Now, that can become tricky when kids are involved, and are we taking the children or are we not? How is that going to play out? But when you see it getting to that point, I mean, is that good advice to leave, or is there another way you can maybe approach the situation before you feel like you have to leave?
Talking about leave the situation?
Just simply leave the situation.
Oh, yeah. By all means, that's my first go-to.
Okay.
Just leave the situation. Do whatever you have to do to not make it worse.
Okay. Whether it's going in the other room or take a drive or walk the dog, whatever.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that's good advice for staying married.
Well, that's a good point.
I don't think that's bad advice in either situation. Conflict resolution is one of the biggest things that people come to me for. They're like, I don't know what to do about him or her. And it's not about the other person. If you're coming to me to talk about you.
Right.
And for us to work on you. The only person that you have any power over is you. But if you change, then the whole relationship has to change. Like if you and I were in a relationship and one of us changed, then the whole relationship changes because you can't deal with me or communicate with me the same way as you used to.
Right.
Because I'm not that person anymore. I'm different.
Right.
I'm going to respond different.
Which also makes it tricky because we're constantly changing.
Absolutely.
As we experience new things, we're constantly, I don't want to say evolving, but I guess we are
Yes, we
evolving.
are.
We're growing.
We're growing, yeah.
So we are constantly changing. So in that regard, do you have any tips to make sure those lines of communication stay open regardless of whether you're going through a divorce or staying married?
I think it's important for us to act like grown-ups.
Okay.
And of course that is a very general term.
Right.
But to realize that arguing can only happen if both people are speaking.
Okay.
And so it can't be an argument if you stop talking. Most people just want to know that they are heard and that they are understood. And I heard something or read something one time that said, seek first to understand and then to be understood.
Okay.
And that's probably a sales trick or something, but it applies in any kind of communication. Seek first to understand what the other person is really saying, not what you think they're saying. Most of the time when people listen to another person, they're listening, but at the same time, they're just hearing what they're saying while they're planning what their rebuttal is going to be.
I got you. They're hearing, but not necessarily listening.
That's right. And that's the difference between hearing and listening. When I hear you and I'm already thinking about what am I going to say when he shuts up, then I'm not really listening to what he's saying. So lots of times we say we are hurting, but we never use those words.
Okay.
So if my husband and I, and he'll be upset that I'm using him, but if my husband and I are having a disagreement, I typically will bypass all that and just say, okay, here's what it is. You have hurt my feelings. When you did this, it hurt my feelings. And then because men and women speak a different language, he'll go, well, really? You know? And so then we'll have a conversation about that. But once I say those words, you have hurt me. That hurt me. Then he can address my pain. But if I don't let him know that, and I'm using all kinds of other words, like, just arguing about something or picking or, you left the spoon in the sink or whatever, then he doesn't realize what's really going on with me.
That helps men too, because
absolutely, we're
fixers.
Yes.
And what I mean by that, because I'm certainly not handy around the house, as Jennifer can attest to, but if Jennifer has a problem, I want to know what that problem is so I can fix it. And if you don't, we're not that complex. I mean, you got to be really kind of straightforward with us for us to figure it out. And be really direct.
Yeah.
And so, coming out and saying, hey, you hurt me and this is what you did to hurt me gives men the opportunity to step back and say, okay. And what I've found is 9 times out of 10, the intent to hurt someone is not there.
It's not even there. No.
And sometimes the realization that you'd hurt them because of that's not even there.
Somebody told me one time, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the video, but there's the message that's given, and then there's what's heard.
Okay.
Everything in between here is the angle of distortion.
Okay.
And the angle of distortion happens because of your perception or my perception or both.
Right.
And so and this can get really deep too, so I have to be careful with this, but the idea is that I have to be willing to hear what you were saying, to hear you, and I call it hearing your heart.
Right.
So if my husband tells me he loves me, but everything that comes out of his mouth hurts me, then I have to question, does he love me?
Right.
So I have to first know that my husband loves me. And then when he says something, I have the ability or the opportunity to say to him, is that what you meant? Here's what I heard.
Right.
Is that what you meant? and then he can either say yes or no. But that eliminates a lot of the back and forth la 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 stuff.
Right.
And a lot of the chaos that we bring into places because of our perception.
Okay. What would you say to someone, because I've heard this more times than I can count, she just knows how to push my buttons, or he just knows how to push my buttons.
Well, of course you do. If you are married, if you know each other at all.
Right.
I mean, it takes a whole 10 minutes to start figuring out somebody.
Right.
What is it they say in the first minute they've come up with some kind of impression of you? Well, it's not a minute.
But it's something like that. First 5 minutes, something
yeah,
like that.
When somebody first meets you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, if you've got any kind of perception at all, you can figure out how to push somebody's buttons within the first 10 minutes. But if I live with you and I know you, then by all means, they know my buttons. My husband knows my buttons.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that he wouldn't be out to hurt me. When you say someone knows how to push my buttons, that's the truth. They do if they live with you, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that they would use that against you. They would do that to hurt you is a different deal.
And usually when we're going through a divorce, that's when I'm seeing they are using those buttons to hurt,
Right.
whatever the motivation is. My advice to folks is understand that they're still your feelings and your emotions, and
Right.
and therefore you should have some sort of control over those.
Absolutely.
And once you acknowledge that, yes, he knows what buttons to push, that does give you some defense when you see the other person pushing those buttons.
Absolutely. And it gives you an opportunity to stand against that and to be aware. And I think self-awareness is the key to most anything.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be aware enough to know that you're going to have to handle yourself better in a certain situation. Wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That to know yourself well enough to say, okay, so, this is probably what he or she is going to do, so I'm just going to need to keep my mouth shut during those times.
Okay. All right.
To whatever,
Good deal. Well, Dee, thanks again. And again, my name's Dusty King with King & King PLC. This is Dee Wright with The Starting Place. We're going to have some contact information where you can get in touch with Dee if you think you may need a little more one-on-one to get through some of these tough times through life. But thanks for joining us, and we'll be back in touch soon.